fabulous.
UIN Syarif Hidayatullah lahir sebagai lembaga pendidikan tinggi yang membukakan cakrawala dunia melalui ilmu pengetahuan dan keagamaan. Hutan Kota Tangerang Selatan, Provinsi Banten, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah memiliki posisi yang strategis karena berbatasan dengan Provinsi DKI Jakarta. Universitas ini berdiri kokoh di atas tanah seluas 223.000 meter persegi yang tersebar di beberapa daerah, hingga menjadi bernama UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta. Kampus ini melampaui beberapa yakni bernama Akademi Dinas Ilmu Agama atau dikenal ADIA, periode Institut Agama Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah, dan saat ini adalah periode menjadi Universitas Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah. Dengan berbagai transformasinya, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta memiliki posisi penting bagi perkembangan pendidikan maupun pemikiran Islam di Indonesia, dan juga turut mewarnai pertumbuhan ilmu pengetahuan dan teknologi di dunia internasional. Sebagai sebuah universitas, lembaga ini berkomitmen pada pembentukan intelektual, spiritual, sosial, dan moral. Komitmen UIN Syarif Hidayatullah dalam membangun pendidikan juga nampak dalam visinya, yaitu menjadikan UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta sebagai pusat keunggulan di bidang studi Islam dan sains yang memperoleh pengakuan internasional. Melalui visi besar itu, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah berkomitmen untuk menjadikan UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta sebagai destinasi internasional untuk studi Islam dan sains, memperkuat pendidikan profesi, memperkuat implementasi integrasi ilmu dan agama, memberdayakan sumber daya manusia SDM berbasis riset, meningkatkan kualitas dan kuantitas infrastruktur, meningkatkan ramah lingkungan, melakukan penguatan manajemen dan tata kelola keuangan berbasis rencana strategis. Ada 11 fakultas dan 1 sekolah pasca sarjana di Universitas Islam Negeri Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta. Universitas ini menawarkan studi-studi keislaman, studi-studi sosial, politik, dan ekonomi, serta sains dan teknologi modern, termasuk kedokteran dalam perspektif integrasi ilmu. Sepanjang 2011 hingga 2015, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah menerima 27.065 mahasiswa untuk program sarjana, magister, profesi, dan doktor. Dan sepanjang 5 tahun terakhir ini, UIN Jakarta telah melahirkan 20.710 orang lulusan sarjana, magister, dan doktor. Mahasiswa UIN Syarif Hidayatullah terdiri dari anak-anak bangsa yang memiliki semangat dan itikat yang besar dan berasal dari berbagai daerah di pelosok Nusantara. Selain dari Indonesia, mereka juga berasal dari berbagai belahan dunia.
Saya Bunga Adetama, Second Runner Up Putri Muslimah Indonesia 2015. Terus terang, tradisi di kampus ini sangat kondusif bagi saya untuk mengembangkan bakat, minat, dan potensi yang ada di diri saya. Pengalaman saya sebagai Putri Muslimah Indonesia membuat saya menjadi lebih percaya diri dan membuat karakter saya menjadi pribadi yang lebih baik.
Tidak ada yang tidak mungkin selama kita terus berusaha. Dukungan dan lingkungan akademis yang ada di UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta telah membantu kami untuk mencapai level ini.
UIN tak pernah berhenti untuk terus memberikan bimbingan kepada kami menempuh jalan pengabdian kepada agama dan negara. Kampus UIN terus serta mengubah saya ke arah kemandirian dan pembentukan kreativitas. Saya berkecimpung di bidang bisnis semenjak semester 3. Dengan memanfaatkan sampah, saya coba memberdayakan masyarakat sekitar untuk bisa mengubah sampah menjadi produk yang memiliki nilai jual. Karena kami ingin merubah paradigma negatif dari sampah menjadi hal yang positif. Karena sampah adalah selalu akan mudah apabila ada harapan.
Sebagai lembaga pendidikan tinggi terkemuka di Indonesia, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah mengambil langkah kerjasama dalam peningkatan kualitas proses belajar dan pengembangan pendidikan. Kerjasama itu dilakukan dengan lembaga maupun institusi di dalam negeri dan di luar negeri. Kerjasama luar negeri telah dilakukan dengan berbagai lembaga di kawasan Asia, Afrika, Eropa, Amerika, Australia, dan Timur Tengah. UIN Syarif Hidayatullah telah meraih banyak prestasi dalam berbagai bidang di tingkat nasional dan internasional. Keberhasilan universitas ini juga bisa dilihat dari munculnya alumni UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta menjadi tokoh-tokoh bangsa, pejabat negara, intelektual muslim, dan politisi yang memiliki reputasi nasional dan internasional.
Keunggulan UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, dosen yang dibandingkan dengan kampus-kampus lain yang ada di Indonesia ini memiliki kapasitas yang baik dari segi hasil pemikiran, dari segi produk karya ilmiah, serta dari segi reputasi internasionalnya. UIN Jakarta sudah banyak mencapai keberhasilan ini. Mendirikan sebuah fakultas kedokteran Islam, berarti lulusannya kan memang harus berbeda ya. Nah, salah satunya adalah kita ingin lulusan dari fakultas kedokteran, khususnya program studi dokter, itu adalah menjadi seorang dokter muslim. Apa itu dokter muslim? Yaitu seorang dokter yang memang mempunyai sikap, ya, yang memang menggambarkan nilai-nilai Islam. Seorang dokter yang melayani pasiennya itu dengan cara-cara yang Islami.
UIN merupakan jendela keunggulan akademik Islam, atau kita sebut knowledge quality and integrity, yang merupakan sinergis antara pengetahuan, integritas, bagian dari komitmen memiliki pengetahuan, dan keimanan. Di samping itu juga UIN memiliki sinergi atau integritas antara keindonesiaan, keislaman, keilmuan, kemodernan, dan kemanusiaan. Pilar-pilar itulah yang membuat UIN menjadi unggul dan distintif dibandingkan perguruan tinggi di Indonesia.
Pilihlah UIN untuk tempat menjadi pengabdian di masa depan. Pilihlah UIN untuk tempat di mana kalian bisa mengembangkan diri sesuai dengan pilihan studinya. Kalian mau studi di bidang agama, kalian mau di bidang ilmu sosial, mau di bidang sains, kedokteran, itu kalau kata guru kami, Pak Polis Majid, kalau sudah menjadi terpelajar, orang itu bisa menjadi apa aja. Dia bisa memimpikan apa aja. Dia bisa menjadi yang terbaik di bidang yang dia inginkan.
Badan Akreditasi Nasional Perguruan Tinggi (BANPT) menyatakan bahwa UIN Syarif Hidayatullah adalah salah satu perguruan tinggi nasional berakreditasi A. Dirancang untuk menjadi universitas kelas dunia, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah telah mengukuhkan diri sebagai jendela keunggulan akademis Islam Indonesia dan menjadi barometer perkembangan pembelajaran, penelitian, dan kerja-kerja sosial yang diselenggarakan Muslim Indonesia dalam berbagai disiplin ilmu. Dengan berbagai capaian selama ini, UIN Jakarta memfokuskan seluruh program kerja sepanjang tahun 2017 hingga 2021 untuk mencapai misi, menjadikan UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta sebagai PTN badan hukum yang unggul dalam riset integrasi keilmuan, keislaman, dan keindonesiaan di Asia Tenggara. Indikatornya adalah berstatus perguruan tinggi berbadan hukum PTNBH, memiliki sumber daya riset yang memadai, dan menjadi 100 perguruan tinggi terbaik di Asia Tenggara. Hingga kelak pada tahun 2027 sampai 2031, UIN Jakarta dapat masuk dalam jajaran 300 perguruan tinggi terbaik kelas dunia.
Saya Profesor Dr. Dede Rosyada MA, Rektor UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta. Pencapaian yang terbaik, yang tertinggi saat yang dicapai oleh UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta sampai hari ini adalah di mana apresiasi dunia luar kepada UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta sudah terlihat dengan pemeringkatan yang dilakukan oleh pemeringkatan luar. GSC umpamanya, Google Scholar Citation Index, itu menempatkan UIN Jakarta sebagai the Big Five di Indonesia, di mana posisi di GSC UIN Syarif Hidayatullah berada pada posisi kelima setelah ITB, UI, Gajah Mada, Undip, kemudian yang terakhir adalah yang kelima adalah UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta. Pencapaian ini tidak lain adalah hasil kerja keras para sivitas akademikanya dan juga keseriusan para guru besar dalam melaksanakan kerja-kerja akademik mereka. Kita mempersiapkan para mahasiswa khususnya mahasiswa yang pada level undergraduate studies, yaitu mahasiswa level sarjana, untuk semuanya mempunyai skill, mempunyai keterampilan yang spesifik skill dan juga general transferable skill. Dan yang paling penting adalah bagaimana mereka bisa berkomunikasi secara global. Mereka bisa berkomunikasi dengan komunikasi seluruh masyarakat untuk seluruh masyarakat ASEAN. Insya Allah kampus ini akan menjadi kampus yang tidak hanya eksklusif untuk Indonesia, tapi juga merupakan bagian dari pengembangan ilmu dan pengetahuan untuk dunia. Untuk itulah maka kemudian kita sekarang one step ahead akan menjadi bagian dari kampus di Asia Tenggara melalui AUNKIE ini, dan mudah-mudahan kita will be accepted as well oleh AUNKIE, sehingga akan menjadi bagian dari kampus besar di Asia Tenggara untuk mendapatkan rekognisi dari dunia, dan akan menjadi par excellences dalam kajian-kajian keislaman dan juga par excellences dalam kajian-kajian sains dan teknologi ke depan. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Santai aja dulu. Karena bagian awal. Ya. Udah mulai.
Well, good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you all for finding time and visiting today's Pre-ICEMS International Webinar 2020. Our topic today is teaching and learning in spotlight, challenges and opportunities during and post-COVID-19. To know that this webinar is hosted by the Faculty of Educational Sciences, UIN or State Islamic University, Sarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta. My name is Zahril Anasi, and I am a host of today's webinar. Before we go further, I would like to give my big honor to the Dean of the Faculty of Educational Sciences, Ibu Dr. Sururin MAG, as a host of this webinar, and also Ibu Dr. Tita Khalis MCOM as a chair of this international webinar organizer, who made sure that everything is running well during this COVID pandemic. And of course, our distinguished guest, we have Professor Lauren Tamalia. Hello, Professor Lauren Tamalia. And then Dr. John Mason, both from Charles Darwin University, Australia, and also Ibu Maila Rahim, our senior lecturer of this Faculty of Educational Sciences at UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta. Well, without any ado, we will enter to main agenda this morning, and we will start our events by reciting prayer according to our respective belief and our religions. And for those who are Muslim, the prayer will be led by Bapak Raswan. Bapak Raswan, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Hamdan yuwafi ni'amahu wa yukafi'u mazidah. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhikal karim wa azimi sultanik. Allahumma salli ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad. Allahumma ighfir lana wa li walidayna wa li jami'il muslimin wal muslimat wal mu'minina wal mu'minat al ahya'i minhum wal amwat. Innaka sami'un qaribun mujibu da'awat ya qadiyal hajat. Allahumma inna nas'aluka salamatan fid din wa afiyatan fil jasadi wa ziyadatan fil ilmi wa barakatan fil rizqi wa tawbatan qabla al maut wa rahmatan indal maut wa maghfiratan ba'da al maut. Allahumma inna na'udzubika minal barasi wal jununi wal judami wa min sayyi'il asqam. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla wa anta taj'alul huzna idza syi'ta sahla. Allahumma tufbi fi taysiri kulli asir fa inna taysiral asir alaika yasir wa as'aluka al-yusra wal mu'afata fid dunya wal akhirah. Allahumma yassir amra hadzal barnamij yani barnamij ism li hadhihi sanah. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilma wa arinal haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah wa arinal batila batila warzuqna ijtinabah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Allahumma inna na'udzubika minal hammi wal huzn wa na'udzubika minal ajzi wal kasal. Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana ba'da idh hadaitana wa hab lana min ladunka rahmatan innaka antal wahhab. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adzaban nar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Bapak Dr. Raswan MA. May Allah bless us. The second agenda is the national anthem of Indonesia. Let's listen, and all the audience, please listen.
Sorry, because Mr. Zaharil mute, so I not list.
Pak Zahril, can you check your, maybe you need to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay.
And repeat, yes.
You can repeat the agenda on your list again.
Okay. The third agenda is symbolic speech from the chair of this event, from Dr. Ibu Tita Kholis MCOM. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for Master of Ceremony, Pak Zaharil. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu semua. The Honorable, the Dean of Faculty Educational Sciences, Islamic State University, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, and all staff. The Honorable all invited speakers, Pre-D6 International Conference of Education in Muslim Society, Pre-ICEMS 2000. Associate Professor Lawrence Tamatea from College of Education, Charles Darwin University, Australia. Dr. John Mason, also from College of Education, Charles Darwin University, Australia. Ibu Maila D.H. Rahim, MA PhD, Faculty of Educational Sciences, Islamic State University, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta. That I respect for all the enthusiastic Pre-ICEMS 2020 participants. All praises be to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the Lord of the world, who has given the mercy and blessings so that we can meet in this webinar in good health and spirit to improve and share our knowledge. And also our deep gratitude for Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, peace upon him, who has brought us from darkness to the brightness. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, in 2014, the International Conference on Education in Muslim Society, we call ICEMS, was organized by Faculty of Educational Sciences, UIN Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta, aims to gather scholars, researchers, and practitioners of education to exchange knowledge, experiences, and ideas regarding education in the world. Through Pre-ICEMS now, we would like to inform you that currently ICEMS is being prepared for the sixth implementation as ICEMS 2020, which is planned to be held on 18 uh, and 19 November 2020 with the theme Emerging Trends in Technology for Education in Uncertain World. This Pre-ICEMS has the theme Teaching and Learning in Spotlight, Challenges and Opportunities During and Post-COVID-19. Of course, the theme was chosen because of condition due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID pandemic forces us to change our lifestyle and raise awareness to master technological advancements. And this webinar aims to explore the challenges and opportunities facing it. Thank you to all invited speakers who are willing to share their knowledge. Thank you also to the support of the Dean and staff and also my colleagues as committees so this event can be held. Of course, I really thank to all participants of Pre-ICEMS 2020. No more than 115 participants and be here and almost 400 participants registered. Keep our spirit to move forward. Hopefully we succeed in achieving the goal. We apologize if there are deficiencies or mistakes. Have good webinar. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Ibu Dita. Then the fourth agenda is welcoming speech as well as official opening from the Dean of the Faculty of Educational Sciences, University Hidayatullah Jakarta, Ibu Dr. Surudin MA. Your time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wa bihi nasta'inu ala umuri dunya waddin. Assalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. The Honorable our speakers, Mr. John Mason and Associate Professor Mr. Lauren Tamatea from Charles Darwin University, Australia, welcome to this meeting. And also the Honorable our speakers also, Dr. Maila Husni Rahim from Faculty of Educational Sciences, University Hidayatullah Jakarta, the Honorable all of the Vice Dean of Faculty of Educational Sciences, and then Honorable Chairperson of Committee of the Sixth ICEMS, Dr. Tita Halis, and all committee, the Honorable all participants of this meeting from many universities. I look this list of participants from many universities and many provinces. All lecturers and students, good morning. Good morning. I am delighted to address you today to the first conference series of the 6th ICEMS International Conference held by the Faculty of Educational Sciences, State Islamic University, Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to our speaker, Mr. John Mason. Welcome, and also Mr. Lauren Tamatea from Charles Darwin University, Australia, who will share their knowledge and experience about the teaching and learning in Spotlight, Challenges and Opportunities during post-COVID-19. Thank you for being with us today with virtual meeting. My thanks also to the committee of the 6th ICEMS International Conference who have organized this event. Ladies and gentlemen, my faculty, Islamic Education Faculty, Islamic Education Sciences, is the biggest faculty in UIN Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta. We have 16 study programs and more than 5,000 students. And now all of my students study at home. All of our lecture work from home. Ladies and gentlemen, pandemic COVID-19 has influenced all systems in our daily life, including teaching and learning. Our schools now are struggling to provide learning for our children is a very effective and safe way. Even though school buildings are being closed to prevent the spread of this coronavirus, teaching and learning process must go on. Open learning, remote or distant learning is becoming the best solution to deliver the learning. But yes, of course, there will be challenges and opportunities in this kind of learning. Ladies and gentlemen, we know this new phase of learning is not an easy task to be accomplished. It is commonly found that not all students and teachers have facilities and devices supporting distant learning from their own homes. Some regions in Indonesia also have a limited network and internet connection, so that students and teachers could not perform well in their Zoom class or teleconference. Distant learning can be less effective due to limited devices and network. On the other side, we can transform such challenges into opportunities for better future. Open learning, remote learning force us to get to know with high technology devices, artificial intelligence, in search engine, and big data is becoming part of our learning system. Both students and teachers will get used to access technology during learning. This is in line with skill being need in industrial revolution 4.0. If we can optimally apply this high-end technology in our learning, hopefully we can create skill and well-prepared human resource for our country. Ladies and gentlemen, during this pandemic, we also realized the essential role of parents and families to support student educational process. Great engagement between school and parents can help effectiveness of learning process and result. Therefore, our learning today really depend on how good collaboration in between all parties, including teachers, family, government, and society. Ladies and gentlemen, reopening school might be our dreams as educators, as we miss a lot our students and direct interaction with them. We need to adapt the new normality to survive in this dynamic world. Education nowadays should promote long life learning and resilience so that our young generation can understand how to cope with problem and manage conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, so may I congratulate this committee for arranging these two speakers, Mr. Jason and Mr. Lauren Tamatea from Charles Darwin University, and also Dr. Maila Husni Rahim, who expertise in entirely relevant to this theme. And the finale, let us open this meeting by reading Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Okay, thank you and enjoy the first pre-conference series of the ICEMS International Conference. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Ibu Dr. Surin, for wonderful speech. Well, to all participants, we have a short break for about 5 minutes. Please activate your videos for us to take photo for documentations before we are going to main event this morning. And also, we would like to hear from you and would like to include your voice in the conversation. So ask questions, share comment, even challenge our ideas. Use the question and answer panel on the right side of your computer to share at any time during the webinar. Then I will invite our moderator today, Bapak Kustiwan Sarif, PhD. Hello, Pak Kustiwan.
Hi, Zahril.
Time is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Pak Zahril. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Honorable Dean and Vice Deans of the Faculty of Educational Sciences at ITK, Syarif Hidayatullah State Islamic University of Jakarta. Our distinguished speakers, Professor Lawrence Tamatea, Dr. John Mason from Charles Darwin University, and Dr. Maila Rahim from FITK, Syarif Hidayatullah State Islamic University. My fellow lecturers and teachers, wherever you're following this webinar, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me to welcome you all to this international webinar, which is part of our seminar series prior to our main event, the 6th International Conference on Education in Muslim Society. Or we usually call it ICEMS. Well, some people call it ICEMS, yet others call it ICEMS. Okay, but why we call it ICEMS? Because we try to sustain that Indonesian taste, ICEMS, to be held in November 2020. My name is Kustibar Sharif. I am lecturer of the English Education Department, Faculty of Educational Sciences, Syarif Hidayatullah State Islamic University of Jakarta. And it is an honor and privilege for me to be moderating this international seminar. Ibu Dekan, thank you so much for this opportunity. Before we go any further, however, so I'd like to remind you again, all the audience, could you please activate or turn your camera on as the organizers are going to take webinar pictures for documentation and reporting purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, this Pre-ICEMS International webinar under the theme Teaching and Learning in Spotlight, Challenges and Opportunities during and post-COVID-19 is so much relevant to our ongoing concern of utmost importance regarding a global crisis due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how this pandemic, as also mentioned by Ibu Dekan just now, has devastated all aspects of our life, including the education sector, virtually everywhere in the world, including Indonesia, of course. Teachers, lecturers, and students and school administrators, for example, are now being faced with unprecedented educational challenges in our history. School closures with a disruptive shift from conventional in-person classes to virtual learning or remote access teaching and learning are just a case in point. And in many parts of the world, like in Indonesia, the situation becomes worse because of the digital divide, something that already beautifully mentioned by Ibu Dekan earlier. So the question or the crucial questions for us to answer is, or the crucial questions for us to answer are, how do we respond to those challenges? And how do we turn those unprecedented challenges into empowering opportunities? And to address these crucial questions, we are so glad to have 3 invited speakers with a great deal of expertise in the issues concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, now I'm proudly presenting to you our distinguished speakers. So let me share this video with you. Just a second, please. Okay, I'm preparing the file. Okay, just a second, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so this is something new that we're going to present to you, our speakers, in a video. I hope the video is showing now. All right, I'm now ready with it. Here we go. Just a second. Some technical problem going on here. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. All right, here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, so let's now proceed to the first presentation by our first speaker, Professor Lawrence Tamatea from the College of Education. But actually, he prefers to be called Pak Ganteng. So instead of Professor Tamatea, okay, feel free to call him Pak Ganteng, okay? And he is going to talk in this international webinar about a theory and practice in teaching in an online COVID-19 world. What a topic to learn from, Professor. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so please welcome Professor Lawrence Tamatea.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm just sharing that. Can everybody see the PowerPoint now?
Yes, sure.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Look, firstly, thank you to the Rector, Pak Dedi Kusaja. Thank you to the Dean of Faculty of Education Sciences, the Chair, the Master of Ceremonies and Moderator, staff of the universities, attendees, and my fellow presenters, Dr. John Mason and Dr. Malia Rahim. So I'm very appreciable for the opportunity to have to share some knowledge. I certainly don't know everything, but what I do know, I'm happy to share with you this morning. So my topic concerns two things. Why we might be engaging in the use of digital technologies at this point in time, beyond the obvious, which is COVID-19. And after I've explored that, I want to follow up by looking at how we can actually do this. So we've heard already this morning about the nature of the problem. The problem is COVID-19 and the challenge this presents for us as educators in being able to provide quality learning experiences to our students in higher education. We've heard that our students are working from home, and we've heard that there is also the issue of the digital divide. I want to start off this discussion around those things by perhaps being a little bit theoretical, because I think it's always useful to understand our contemporary challenges from the perspective of theoretical frameworks. And working in the digital space, as I have for quite some time, I've often relied upon the work of this man. His name is Jean Baudrillard, and I'm sure that that's probably John in English. And Mr. Baudrillard was a French philosopher, sociologist, political commentator. And he wrote quite a lot about the 21st century world. And of course, towards the end of his writing, that world was becoming increasingly digital. And I think his ideas became more and more relevant as time went by. When I was teaching an undergrad over 20 years ago now in teacher education, I would refer to the research and writing of Mr. Baudrillard, and key amongst that research and writing is this book called Simulacra and Simulation. And I used to tell my students, my young students, how the world was heading along a particular trajectory wherein our engagement with reality would be increasingly mediated, not only through televisual formats, but by digital formats. And back in those days, my students found that a little bit difficult to believe. And yet, as time goes by, I still refer to Baudrillard's work, and it's becoming much easier for the students to understand what he was saying as the years go by. So, what was Baudrillard saying? He was saying that according to the logic of our times, humans will increasingly interface with reality, or the analog world, through mediation. In other words, our contact with the analog world will be increasingly mediated, or in other words, there will be a digital mediation layer increasingly placed between us and the real world. And if we think about it, that's exactly what's happening today in this conference. Now, we're all located in different parts of the world, and to have communication, we are doing that through a digital mediation layer. Most obvious in the form of the computer screen that we're all interfacing with, and of course the ICT architectures that drive all of this. Why do I rely on Baudrillard? Surprisingly, Baudrillard did not like where all of this was heading. In fact, he didn't like it at all. And he thought it was quite problematic. But regardless of his views of whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, I think he had a lot to tell us about the way this digital world works. And so what he was saying is that in the 21st century, humanity increasingly lives in the territory, increasingly prefers to live on the map rather than reality. And so what is the map? The map is the digital representation of the analog. And so here we have a digital map of Indonesia, and I can say that, or I could say that I learned something about Indonesia through this map, but of course the reality is I can't, because it's a representation. And of course that was Baudrillard's key concern, the difference between the digital map and the territory. So we end up at this point in the 21st century living in this hyper reality. And so education for us, of the kind that I will speak about shortly, is education characterized by hyper reality. It's neither really one or the other, neither fully digital or fully analog, but a combination of the both, of the map and the territory. What does hyperreality look like? Well, if you look at your screens, you are seeing it played out in front of you right now. That's hyperreality. But if we walk down the street, we might, well, perhaps not now, maybe in 10 years' time, or sit on a bus, this is what it would look like. So the digital overlaid on our analog experience, and of course, the advertising and all of these sorts of things being played out. I remember having a conversation 20 years ago with somebody saying that we would have these things called mobile phones, and besides making calls on them, they would deliver advertising to us. I couldn't get my head around that concept then, but now that's just the way it is. What else about Baudrillard? Well, if you've heard of the movie trilogy called The Matrix, you may or may not know that Baudrillard's work was used to write the script for The Matrix. And of course, are we living in a matrix now? That's debatable. But we are certainly living in a world inscribed by the digital. The Federal Drugs Authority in the United States has just approved the first prescription video game for kids with ADHD. So this is where we are. 20 years ago in education, if you wanted to play a video game, people would look at you as if that was something that was a little bit strange, and they would give you 100 reasons why you couldn't do that. And yet now we are prescribing video games for ADHD. So this is a part of the new normal, isn't it?
Yeah.
But this is not just happening in the Western world or in my world or in Darwin. It's happening all over the world. And it's posing challenges and questions and ethical dilemmas, and we need to be able to respond to this challenge. It's happening in your world, the world of Muslims, the Islamic world, as this graphic shows us. And why not? I was reading an Indonesian article yesterday, and this article was about dakwah, and I believe you have a faculty there aligned with this, yeah? So, and the article is tantangan dakwah di era digital lebih kompleks, apa yang dikatakannya. And I think this article has a few things that could inform how we teach in the 21st century. And so what did they say? I think this is the problem. This is part of the problem. Let's read the first paragraph. Tren anak-anak milenial itu seperti apa? Mereka ini kan simpel, instan, dan juga tidak bertele-tele, efisien, efektif. Ini yang perlu dipahami ketika kita mau melakukan aktivitas dakwah kepada mereka, tutur dia. We're teaching millennials, we're teaching people who've grown up in this environment, we're teaching those students who are sometimes called the digital natives, and they are characterized by these particular learning requirements. The article goes on to say that we need a platform which can be suitable to our students, the use of social media, which meets their needs. And we really should stop a teaching style which is simply lecturing or telling verbal stories. So we have to adapt to the times. And reading this article on how dawah is delivered in the 21st century, I thought, wow, I think there are a few lessons to be learned about education that we can take away from this, because all fields are challenged to teach effectively in the 21st century era, inscribed as it is by the digital paradigms. At CDU, we are fortunate enough to have platforms and architecture in place already. And so the challenge of COVID-19 hasn't been so significant that it's disrupted our normal operation. For us, that platform is Blackboard Collaborate. And in this learning and teaching environment, we can make use of digital audio, video, we screen share, we have breakout rooms for groups, we can upload assessment, we can use digital rubrics for assessment, we can share the whiteboard, we have blogs, forums, Zoom, of course, and Microsoft Teams. So all those are part of the standard infrastructure that we have at CDU. But CDU aims to be an innovator in the teaching and learning space. And so we go beyond the use of the built-in standard affordances in that platform to provide our teacher education students with an innovative quality learning experience. So at this point in my discussion, I've moved on to the what. We've looked at a description of the times through the theory of Baudrillard. We've looked at the standard platform for delivering online learning at CDU. And now we're going to have a look at the what in terms of how we think we can do this with a little bit more innovation and quality. So this is a sim lab for training teachers how to teach in the classroom. And teachers don't need to be in the classroom. So they will interact with these digital students in real time and engage in a number of classroom interactions. And through this, we hope that they attain some of the skills of teaching and learning. And I can say that my colleague, Dr. John Mason, is running this project in the College of Education, and we're watching this very closely to see the kinds of results that it generates. But it's just one example of how we can use digital technology in the professional experience place to overcome not only the challenges of distance, but respond to COVID-19 as well. So I won't play these videos, but they will be available to you when you access this PowerPoint, because I don't think our bandwidth is going to work at this end. Okay, so I just go back the right way. Okay, so the area that I teach in teacher education is coding. So I love to teach our students how to go out into schools and teach programming to their students. And so why do we teach this? Because governments all over the world, including Australia, the United States, England, the European Union, are saying that just like Baudrillard said, we live in a 21st century, we're going digital, the world is mediated by this digital layer, and this is the reality of things, and we need to be able to have students who understand this world. So we have reading, writing, we have mathematics, and the fourth literacy, they say, is coding. And so we do this in Australia. So this is my area. And as I said to people before, it's really good when you can go to work and your hobby, they pay you to do the things you like to do. It doesn't get better than that. So what do we do? I had to think about how I could deliver to my experience, to my students, over 70% who are online, that means not here, so they're in the digital learning space. How could I teach coding to those students? This applies to the post-COVID world because in many contexts, like yours now, your students are no longer there. And so I had to sit down and think, well, what kind of learning experiences can I provide for online students? So one of those activities we engage in is this thing called Scratch coding. And this is free and it's available online. And so in Scratch coding, my students have an assignment and they go online and they code up a little program. And when you watch this, you will be able to see the animations and the voice and all of those sorts of things. And they share them publicly on the Scratch website. So it provides an opportunity for not only computational thinking, but computational participation, which is effectively networking online, or the social dimension of coding and so what. So I can go onto this website now and I can see my students' assignments that have been posted there over the last couple of years, and students who are doing the assignment this year can see assignments posted by previous students. So that's one example of what we can do. And it doesn't cost anything, but you will need, or the students will need, an internet connection. Moving on. A second activity that they do, again, this doesn't cost anything, so this is free. They develop a website, a web page. Now, I could give them something easy to do like WordPress and a few of these other drag and drop sorts of things, but I want them to understand the code and to start thinking in the way of a programmer about the world. Because if they don't have this experience, it's going to be very hard for them to teach this to their students when they go out in schools and become teachers. So they build web pages like this, and you can see there's Obviously, there's HTML and tables and lists and colours and all those sorts of things. And it's a wonderful experience because they come in very anxious and nervous, and they end the unit being able to produce something. And this is stored on their local hard drive, doesn't need to be hosted. So again, this is a free resource that can be used. And this one here is called Minecraft. So I don't know if you know too much about Minecraft, but it is a game online played by millions of people all around the world. And you can not only play this game, but you can make your own game. So you can build the game to suit your interests. And of course, lots of kids in primary school play Minecraft. So if you teach your teachers to be able to teach Minecraft coding, they're going to be very popular when they go out into schools and teach this, because they're tapping into the world of their own students. And so you can see a little bit of code here. I think there's a couple of options, couple of programming languages for this. But the good thing about Minecraft is you can code up any game world that you want. And you can see on the graphic in the top, we have the someone's coded up the Kaaba there. And so in other words, you can make it contextually relevant to the world of your own students. And of course, this is also a free resource. It doesn't cost anything, and it is publicly shareable. So it's a resource that transcends both time and distance. We teach our students to build computers. We disassemble them and reassemble them. But how do you teach a student to build a computer when 70% of them are online? I've only got 4 computers here that we can pull apart, but I've got 100 students. So what we do is we use this PC building simulator. There is a video of this as well, which you will be able to watch when you access the PowerPoint. But this allows me to broadcast in the online learning environment our live classroom session where we build computers in real time, and they can then copy that at home or engage in activities at home. This piece of software is not expensive. It's relatively cheap by most standards, and all students can afford this. And so the thing with these kinds of tasks is they're not only cheap and affordable, they involve computational thinking, they involve computational participation, but they're real world tasks. So we're not just delivering a verbal speech. It's not simply a lecture. It's problem-based learning and getting the students involved in something that really interests them. Quickly, as I'm conscious of the time, one way we can do these kinds of things and roll out teaching and learning initiatives in an online environment is to establish a whole of faculty or whole of school-wide approach. And at Charles Darwin University, we initiated our Transforming Pedagogies project, Transforming Online Pedagogies, also known as TOP. And this has a number of domains through which we deliver both innovation and efficiencies in the online learning environment. So I'm a member of this, and so is my colleague, Dr. John Mason, as well. Finally, one of the challenges that was noted this morning is this issue of the digital divide. And I absolutely acknowledge that, and I'm very, very aware of that. And it's actually something which motivates some of my research. You may be aware that I have a research project going on in Bali, which teaches students in rural areas, in rural Bali. So they're not rich people. They're farmers of labourers and children of labourers and children of farm workers. And I wanted to give those children the opportunity to access coding skills so they would have some options around future employment. And we work or partner with the Slucut Learning Centre in Bali, where we have achieved some really good outcomes in the coding space. So what I have done is transported some of my university curriculum into rural Bali, where we can deliver these kinds of learning experiences and understandings to those kids who are in need, using a minimal set of technologies. We use a range of old machines, so we have to adapt the kind of software that we use to those machines. Sometimes the internet doesn't work. Sometimes it's challenging to teach there. Sometimes the bandwidth is not enough. So these are all challenges that we encounter. So I'm very much aware of the digital divide. I think quickly before I finished, for those who are still asking, yes, there's a digital divide. How do we do this? There's this little notion called unplugged. So you can still learn computational thinking skills in an unplugged way, where you replicate the essence of those coding activities through analog formats that can be done, undertaken where the student actually is. So in conclusion, it's ironic that this little virus thing called COVID-19 has come along and is helping to realise Mr. Baudrillard's worst nightmare. He would be rolling in his grave right now, I think, thinking about where all this is headed, because, as I said, he did not like it at all. Nonetheless, I think this is our new reality, and rather than see it as entirely problematic, I think it's ushering in a new way of working in the world. It's ushering in a new way of teaching and learning in the world. And if you had asked me 1 year ago to do a Zoom conference or a meeting, I would have been very hesitant. Very, very hesitant. But as my colleague, Dr. John Mason, has said already, it seems to offer many, many advantages. And so with that in mind, I would encourage everybody to approach this in a really productive and opportunistic way, because for me, I think it's a bright future, and I think there are some real advantages in this space. Thank you for your participation.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Tamatia, for such a thorough and elaborate presentation. And I believe we have learned quite a lot, not only big ideas like digital representation, hyper reality, or but also some practical ideas, something that you've been doing, like having digital students in digital learning space. I think those are so interesting for us. Thank you so much again. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the next presentation to be made by our next distinguished speaker, Dr. John Mason, also from the College of Education, Charles Darwin University, Australia. And he's going to speak about growing opportunities through open educational practices. I think this is another intriguing topic for us to learn from. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. John Mason.
Terima kasih Pak Kustiawan, and selamat pagi, selamat siang semuanya. Saya sangat berada di sini hari ini, tapi bahasa Indonesia saya kurang bagus, so I will speak in English. Okay, so let me just share my screen. Oh, so can I just share my screen? So it's not letting me share just yet.
Okay, I think you have access to.
It's not letting me just yet.
Really? Okay, so somebody please help Dr. Mason to get access to screen sharing, please.
Oh, here we go. I got it.
Okay, all right.
I got it. Okay. So we can see that. Okay, so the topic of my talk today is a little bit different to the talk that Park Lawrence has just given, a very stimulating talk. Actually, I have not listened to Lawrence give that talk on Baudrillard before, but I've listened to him talking about many other things. But I found that very interesting to hear that talk. So my focus today is around notions of openness in education and growing opportunities in educational practice that are open during this time of COVID and hopefully post-COVID. We don't know when post-COVID is going to be with us. Maybe next year. Maybe not for many years. We don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety that we are sharing about the situation we're in right now. So first of all, we have an internal protocol at my university. When we give presentations, we sometimes just take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of Indigenous and Indigenous cultures, the owners of the land that I'm presenting on today, the Larrakia people from Darwin, who have been looking after this place for some people say up to 50,000 years. We can learn a lot from these people and the local wisdom that they have to offer. And I sometimes think that local wisdom is something that we very much need in this time where we're often dealing with very big global agendas. So the main message that I really want to emphasize today is that this idea of openness in education, particularly in this digital era, is expanding. And that there's a few key messages I want to, other messages I want to make here today too, and that is that the time we're in is a time, yes, we must act and we must find solutions and all of that, but I'm feeling very nervous about acting too quickly, and I think there's a very positive aspect about the situation we're in, and it's giving us a time to pause. It's a time to pause and rethink what it is we're doing, rethink what it is that matters most in our lives, to reconcile ourselves with this situation that's come upon us very, very abruptly and has changed our lives forever, likely to change our future economic activities. And it's also a time for, a lot of people are talking about a reset. Now, of course, a reset button in the digital world is something that usually takes us back to the initial state. And unfortunately, I don't think we've got that kind of reset button today. We're going to have to have an entirely different reset as we go forward. So the topics I'm covering today, I'm going to ask the question and explore the question of what is openness in education. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and the architecture of the internet. I'm going to make some reference to global initiatives, particularly work done by UNESCO. And of course, the impact of COVID-19 and recalibrating the open opportunities in education. And something I'm referring to here is open educational practices. So, what is open? If we look at the Australian dictionary, we can find there are over 80 entries for this word. It's a high utility word in English. We can use it in so many different ways. And here's just a few examples. The door is not shut. To disclose, an unobstructed place. To render accessible to knowledge. To cut or break into. To begin an event. To uncover. All these meanings. We have so many meanings about this word open. And this is one explanation as to why this word seems to have appeal within the education sector, why it's been picked up with so much vigour. It's also a noun, a verb, and an adjective. As I said, it has high utility. Also, I did a quick look in Bahasa Indonesia, and I think it's a similar kind of case. There were also other aspects about openness in the world we live in these days, and I'm sure the pictures of these two characters on the slide, you will have seen these two before, Julian Assange and Edward, what's his other name? Anyway, these two guys here have been quite prominent in trying to point to the importance of openness in information, and they've also pointed to concerns about excessive surveillance and too much information being hidden from society. So this is another meaning of openness, many meanings. Here's another meaning. Here's a picture of me looking a little younger than I am today. And I'm standing on my local beach, which is in the open spaces of Casuarina. And there I would also like to think that I'm a fairly open person. So we use these words open in lots of different ways. When talking about the internet, there's also quite a technical narrative that's important to consider. And that is that many of you will know that the origins of the internet go way back to 1969 with initiatives from the US military trying to develop a communication system that would be resilient in case we had nuclear warfare. And at the time, military architectures were very much about hierarchies, or they still are about hierarchies, and communication systems. If you take out the top part of the hierarchy, you will destroy the complete communication system. So there was a need to develop a robust and distributed open information system, and that is the basis of the internet. And what took place in the coming years was a lot of efforts to try to standardize what the architecture should look like. And here's a technical representation of what's called the Open Systems Interconnection model. It was a 7-layer protocol, all about the technical design of the internet. Actually, what happened in practice as the years evolved is that it just became a 4-layer or a 5-layer model. What we use today, the TCP/IP model, and on top of that, we're using HTTP on the web. That's the hypertext transfer protocol. It's a very open, connective way of connecting data. So this slide here is one that I've put together and I sometimes use in my teaching because it's a representation of all the major milestones that I've experienced since I started working in university environments. And this happened way back prior to the web, when hypertext and multimedia were first making a big splash back in the early 1990s. And I can remember all these different moments along the way of this digital revolution, big moments, and each of these moments, when for example, Google arrived in the late 90s, and open educational resources and web services and YouTube, social media, smartphones, all these different things, when they came, they made a big change to the way that we worked. And sometimes this has led to terminology such as disruptive technology. Some people refer to digital technology as disruptive technology. So, okay, so I won't go into detail about this slide. There's many things we can say about this, and many narratives, many stories that we can layer on top of this ongoing digital revolution that's taking place. So now, here we are, COVID-19. What's happening? There's a lot that's happening. In terms of some of the narratives that can be talked about over this last 30 years or so, the development of the web, I've identified three really important ones that have been happening. They're still happening together, but really the first important innovation on the web was all about search. The next one has all been about social. And I think the period that we're in now is very much about smart. There's a possibility that there is another trend going on right now too. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of development happening around the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. Lots of new developments coming all the time with ICT. And there's a challenge here as to what will the new trend actually be. And there's a possibility. I was watching an interesting YouTube last night all about how AI could in fact threaten in time the human species, depending on how it's handled and how it's developed. So I'd like to think that within this period of COVID-19, we actually have time. We've got time to recalibrate things, and we've got time to rethink, to reconcile with this new world, this so-called new normal that is still emerging. I think we're a long way away from even imagining what post-COVID will be like before we can reset what it is we're doing. So I do think that we have a big opportunity in front of us right now, and that is to rethink very carefully what our priorities are and how we might best design processes for teaching and learning as we go forward. Now, obviously, digital technology is going to play a large role in that, but I think there's other things beyond the technology, and that's the human part in this picture that's going to be very important in the way that we go forward. So the idea of openness, just to go back to one of the main themes here, is not something that's just necessarily part of the internet story, of the evolution of the web. We can trace the idea of openness in education way back to Socrates and Confucius, and certainly many other world teachers around that period of human history. And in the early 20th century, educators such as John Dewey and Maria Montessori had also had a lot to say about openness in learning, having open minds, and even the terminology open learning was used by Dewey and Montessori. So in the internet era, we can see this change. We can see a bit of a shift. I've been part of an IT standardization activity internationally for over 20 years now, working in various standardization groups, and we've been particularly interested in developing open standards during this period. And the open standards have been very much part of how the various applications such as Blackboard and all the various other learning management systems, including Moodle, the open learning management systems have evolved. They're all built upon open standards. We can see here a comparison between the ideas of open learning nearly 100 years ago and the idea of the early open standards here around 2000. And we can see that there's a difference here. When Dewey and Montessori talking about openness, we're talking about the learner, very much the main player, the main focus, whereas standards to date, a lot of them have been to do with systems and content. So back to my main message, that this idea of openness is actually evolving, it's expanding in this era that we're working in.
Ibu beli di mana?
Early in the 2000s, there was this article that came out. The title of the front cover of the magazine, Wired. I don't know whether you know this magazine, but it was all about Linus Torvalds, the person who became famous for inventing an operating system that could compete with the very costly Unix system. He invented Linux. And of course he earned himself this reputation of being the so-called leader of the free world for inventing this practice around promoting openness and coming up with this idea of open source, sharing the coding, sharing the source code of programs so that many communities around the world could build upon that activity and improve on them. So in the web era, openness so far has generally been connected with issues around access to content, the licensing of content, the sharing of content. Sometimes it's been to do with systems and standards, systems interoperability, but it's also been all about public benefit and the public domain, and this idea that if research is publicly funded, then it should have public access. It shouldn't be locked away in a place on the internet where you have to pay to download these articles. So around 2002, UNESCO was very keen on what was happening with openness in education, and they were the first ones to coin this term, open educational resources. And this OER has been very, very important, a very key characteristic of the use of the web in education over these last 2 decades. And along with the OER came this idea of the 5 Rs. Reuse, revise, remix, retain, and redistribute. These 2 ideas have gone hand in hand. But my view here is that a lot of the OER, we're at a particular point in the evolution of the web, in that I think that these 5 permissions, given that they're all focused on content, is that we're about to move into a new phase, and this phase has already started, I guess, with open source. But the way I'm reading things is that open educational practices are going to be much more prominent as we move forward. And what I mean by open educational practices is what we're doing today, I guess, is we're using a platform, we're connecting people from all over the place. We haven't got a paywall here. We're just engaging in activities around sharing of knowledge and engaging with each other, asking questions. There's a slide there. I've also shared these slides. I think they will be distributed if you want to get a copy of these slides. But there's a quotation there that simply defines what open educational resources are, how UNESCO defined them. We'll also notice that in this age where artificial intelligence is becoming prominent in the broader digital ecosystem, and it's going to be very visible very soon. There's still this idea of digital content and some principles that underpin how it should be used on the internet. And there's very many initiatives around that are like this this idea around FAIR, F-A-I-R, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. These principles around managing content in the AI era for internet, for machines and people. Still all about content. So looking forward, if we think about what is actually happening on the internet, then we can see that there is all this openness in the basic network architecture anyway. While we have the walls around our physical spaces and even in our bounded online spaces, sometimes in our learning management systems, we also find that there's all these different ways that people connect. We can connect through WhatsApp, we can connect through Zoom, we can connect through all sorts of tools and apps in the open internet. So the question becomes, if we look at the foundation of open educational resources supporting a lot of this activity, that's free access to high quality educational content, then there's all sorts of learning and teaching practices that align nicely with these qualities of open learning content. Tracking back across the last 20 years too, it's very interesting to see all the different versions of how this idea of open has been used within the education sector. Many of you will know or will have heard of the MIT Open Courseware initiative that took place way back in 2002. At that time, I was also participating in work with MIT called the Open Knowledge Initiative, OKI. That was all about open specifications and open services being defined. But these days, we can find, if you're a researcher, you will know that you have to use an ORCID. That's an ID. That's an open researcher and contributor ID. It's a way of connecting all your research output with other researchers and keeping all that information in an organised way. So just looking at this slide, you can see there are so many ways in which openness is being deployed here. Okay, the Open Inquiry Project and open data, OER Commons. This agenda is just growing. And so in the broader context, I guess, of the UN and the 15-year period that we're in now since 2015, when the Sustainable Development Goals were first articulated, we have one of these goals around sustainability. All these goals are around sustainability, but the goal of quality education. How are we going to deliver, provide access to quality education for everyone? I'm aware that there are, hundreds of millions of children actually don't have access to quality education around the globe these days, and as a consequence of COVID, that number's likely to explode over the coming year or so. So this question of sustainable development all of a sudden is very much in the spotlight. It very much begs the question is, what is it that we can sustain here? And so this is why I think it's very important for us to take the opportunity to rethink what it is that we want to take forward. clearly within the SDG 4, that one sustainable goal for education, quality education, there's all sorts of sub-agendas around the formal education system, how that should grow, how that should be sustained, the skills. We talk about 21st century skills, computational thinking skills, media skills. Many different kinds of skills are important. So if we do a bit of a search on OER and openness in education, we'll also find lots of material that can help guide us. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Mason. You are now in your last 5 minutes for your presentation.
No problem. I'm winding up. So there are these guidelines here for open educational resources policy development that UNESCO has provided. And also, if we do take this moment seriously to rethink and to reset and to think about where we can take this open agenda, then I think there's lots we can do with this. There's lots that we can do around open collaboration and open research agendas, open teaching, open peer review, open assessment, open exams. There's a trend all around openness, and it's, in my reading of it, it's around a bigger picture of open educational ecosystems. And I think it's also a story about resilience within the teaching and learning processes that we might be pursuing here. So an example of this is that shortly after COVID really started to take a hold around the globe, I noticed that there was a range of open research projects being propagated all around the world, and this one was coming from the UK, involving the Cambridge University Press and a few other players. And every day for about 6 weeks, there was a question. If you signed up for this, there was a question that you could answer and contribute to a large data set that was being collected in terms finding out about the experience that people were going through as a consequence of COVID. It's been very interesting to participate. It's just been scaled back to a question a week now, not a question every day, because I think there was recognition of a bit of fatigue. But if you also do a search on what else is happening out there in terms of the ongoing evolution of the internet infrastructure that we have, in Europe, there's a next generation internet initiative. And again, it's also dedicated to nurturing and developing and sustaining a vibrant open internet. Okay, another example of where we're likely to see openness being explored. And of course, there's lots of free materials being made available around the net at the moment. Every other day, I get a new alert, either on Twitter or some channel that I'm using, advising me of because of the time we're in, there's all this free access to content. So I'm just expecting that this kind of thing is only going to expand. So lots of examples of this coming through the net at the moment. Lots of examples. So then that's just a very quick run through a topic that I'm particularly interested in. It's hard to put it all together within the time period, but I'm very, very interested in this whole idea of open educational practice and where this might go in this coming period. And I'm very open to exploring what we can do together in both research and also teaching and learning. So just to reiterate, that's the message that I wanted to get across in my presentation, and I thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Meshin. That was a really insightful presentation. So a lot of ideas. I believe we have learned quite a lot of interesting ideas, especially related to the idea of openness in education. But also, we also have learned from Dr. Meshin about the significance of recalibrating those opportunities through rethinking, reconciling, and resetting. But we have to always be smart, okay, in going, in searching, and also in going social. Be smart. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Next, last but not least, now let's listen to the third presentation by our distinguished speaker, Dr. Myla Rahim from our Faculty of Educational Sciences. And she's going to talk about motivation despite all limitations, Indonesian university students' propensity during COVID-19 pandemic. This is also a very interesting topic. So now I invite Dr. Rahim to give your presentation.
Terima kasih Bapak Gustiwan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I will try share screen first. Desktop and share. Go. Present. Okay, good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen, Vice Rector in Operation, Professor Dr. Andi Faisal Bakti, Dean of Faculty of Educational Studies, Ibu Dr. Sururin, Vice Deans, Dr. Kadir, Dr. Muin, Dr. Halimi, Chairperson and Committee Member of ICEMS, Dr. Tita Mariati and team, invited speakers, Pak John Mason, Pak Lawrence Tamatea, faculty members, students, and alumni of the Faculty of Educational Studies and academics from other universities in Indonesia and abroad. I'm presenting my latest work on emergency remote learning in tertiary education in Indonesia during the outbreak of COVID-19. The study overall objective was to investigate the implementation of remote learning in tertiary education in Indonesia from the students' perspectives. Three key research questions were raised. The first question is, what was the university students' experience of emergency remote learning during the COVID-19 crisis? The second one, what university students in Indonesia like and dislike about the remote learning implemented during the COVID-19 crisis? The third question, what kept students motivated to learn despite all the limitations they encountered and endured during the COVID-19 pandemic? In disseminating the study reports, I wrote an article for each research question. It is planned that the first paper will be published within today or next 2 days. It's on the final editing process now. The second paper has passed the review process and will be published on the beginning of August. Okay. And I'm finishing the last article. I've taken this opportunity to get feedback from you. If you are interested in the articles, please write to me. I'll give you a copy of the article after it has been published. All are in open access journal. I'm promoting openness as highlighted previously by Bapak John Mason. My email address is shown on the screen. The coronavirus has had a massive impact on health, employment, energy, agriculture, the global economy, the emotional well-being of people, and also education. Governments have tried several different methods to minimize morbidity and associated mortality, avoid an epidemic peak that overwhelms the healthcare services, keep the effects of the economy within manageable levels, and also development and widespread manufacture. Quarantine, social distancing, and isolation of infected population can contain the epidemic. Upon learning from previous influenza epidemic studies, school closure will also introduce as another step to help try to contain the virus. As a background of the methods of this research, in Indonesia, national school closure began on March 23rd, 2020, and in some provinces such as Jakarta, Central Java, Banten, West Java, and Aceh began on March 16, 2020. National school closures in Indonesia have affected 60.2 billion learners and 2.3 million educators who study or teach at 425,451 educational institutions from early childhood to higher education institution. I collected this data from scattered data, statistic data from the Minister of Education statistic. The statistics are for educational institutions under the authority of the Ministry of Education and Culture only, not including religious education institutions under the Ministry of Religious Affairs. In tertiary education, the national closure of higher education in Indonesia has affected all campuses in 34 provinces. When we use the most recent comparative statistics on higher education in 2018, this closure affects 4,670 higher education institutions, 8,043,480 students, and 294,820 lecturers under the Ministry of Education and Culture. In addition, there were 866 Islamic higher education institutions under the Ministry of Religious Affairs, with a total number of students and lecturers for whom no details are identified. Those 406,070 institutions of higher education spread across the archipelago. This map was drawn by me using data from the Higher Education Directorate. These show how tertiary education are distributed throughout the archipelago. The universities are located not only in urban cities, but in rural area as well. We can imagine the challenges of implementing emergency remote learning in this island nation. For this study, I use the word emergency remote learning, not online or virtual learning, since while planned online learning experiences are significantly different from those provided remotely in response to a crisis or disaster. The research employed a qualitative method of phenomenological analysis to understand the subjective interpretation of the fundamental object of the analysis by investigating the nature of their experience and identifying the research examined the individual experience of 80 university students. In order to protect the privacy of the participants and to allow them to speak freely, their identities and the name of the universities were all hidden. I used a purposeful sampling technique in this research. Participants were selected for a variety of purposes, such as access to data, duration of the study, the variety of backgrounds of the participants, and the program they were studying at the university. I deliberately selected students from educational program as they are being trained to become teachers and took training courses in learning strategies, educational media, and curricula. They could therefore relate their past courses to the situation they found themselves in. The data was collected in creative ways due to the large-scale social restrictions that were in place in Jakarta at the time the research was conducted, which meant that I was unable to conduct direct interviews. The methods of data collection were diaries and essays. The participants wrote a diary of their day-to-day learning activities for 2 weeks from 4 to 18 May 2020. Subsequently, they were asked to conclude their thoughts and opinion in the form of a reflective essay about learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, which was collected on May 20, 2020. For data triangulation and to establish a detailed understanding of phenomena, so in addition to diaries and essays, I conducted focus group meetings using the Google Meet platform. Discussions were held twice. Each meeting was held for 120 minutes and 40 participants attended. The meetings were on 26 and 27 May 2020. The focus group discussion were also targeted as member check to increase the accuracy, reliability, relevance, and transferability of the result. I used the N5O program to manage and analyze data. I also created a memo in the N5O program that allowed me to record ideas and evaluate the participants' views, viewpoints, and experiences on emergency online learning. In analyzing the result, I followed a two-stage coding model by Miles, Huberman, and Saldana. The first cycle coding was initially conducted for the data, followed by the second cycle codes, for which initial codes were organized into meaningful categories, themes, or constructs. When reporting the result, I made summative synthesis assumption based on my interpretation, supported by evidence from the data analysis. We are going to the question number 1 for this research. Okay. Question number 1. In the question number 1, the question is, how did university students experience emergency remote learning during the COVID-19 crisis? Result revealed that students' experiences fell into 2 overarching themes, each with related sub-themes. The 2 identified themes and sub-themes are blended learning with the sub-themes of e-learning, M-learning, and conventional learning, and B, paradoxical learning with the sub-themes of flexible learning and challenging learning. I classified 25 codes in the first cycle coding from the data gathered from 80 diaries, 80 reflective essays, and 2 focus group discussion. I then grouped related codes into 5 groups, which included e-learning, M-learning, conventional learning, flexible learning, and challenging learning. You can see here on the right side of the screen. I summarized 2 key themes of the study result in the second coding process, blended learning and paradoxical learning. I concluded that emergency remote learning, students experience blended learning approaches and their experiences were paradoxical. They enjoyed learning from home, but also saw it as challenging too. On the right side of the screen, we can see illustration of the process of codification, thematic discovery, and construction of assertion. Blended learning. On the 25 codes found in the first coding cycle, 13 are related to the media or methods using the emergency remote learning. I then grouped codes that show similar meaning in categories: e-learning, M-learning, and conventional learning. In my paper, I explain why e-learning and M-mobile should be differentiated in the Indonesian case, because majority of internet users in Indonesia are using mobile technology, not internet home-based connection. I concluded from these categories that learning remotely during the COVID-19 situation involved a mix of technological learning media and conventional methods or using blended materials. Blended learning was used for instruction or explanation, discussion, evaluation, and enrichment. I mapped out the 13 media or learning methods and the purpose of their use. On the screen, we can see the map. WhatsApp is a prevalent medium used for all these learning purposes. WhatsApp is used to explain, discuss, evaluate, and enhance learning. In addition, WhatsApp is also used for almost all courses during the emergency remote learning period. The data reveals that emergency remote learning has not always been entirely conducted online using sophisticated technology. They also use conventional learning. Conventional learning here, it's not on-campus learning, but conventional methods used are the students take notes, use paper and pens to help them understand learning materials more efficiently. They took notes on the video, sounds recording, ebook, PowerPoint presentation, and journal provided by the lecturer. They felt that in general, they had not learned anything if they did not write in it. They did not write it in a book. They seem to be able to understand more quickly when they wrote down what they had learned in a notebook. Paradoxical learning. Paradoxical learning. The second main theme of the finding is paradoxical learning. I use this concept to describe how students had paradoxical perspective and insight into learning. On the one hand, they saw emergency remote learning as flexible, but on the other hand, they also saw it as challenging. Students said that learning remotely at home gave them the flexibility to manage their time. Contradictory to the amount of flexibility, they also argued that the lecturers overloaded them with assignments and they therefore found it difficult to manage their time. Number two, the students said that during remote learning, they have a lot of family time and could study in a comfortable and quiet place. In contrast to this, they also felt disturbed by their siblings and the noise at home. Number three, some students did some regular exercise at home. They spare extra time for self-care because the students were staying at home. They were able to take break during learning. They didn't want to push themselves too hard to study. Their main focus was to keep healthy and not to be too tired. Other respondents, however, felt that compared to face-to-face learning, remote was much more tiring. One interesting excerpt from a student, this is a tickle to us as a lecturer, he said, a lot of tasks. The lecturer should consider the fact that the student is staying at home to avoid illness or infection from happening. The lecturer gave us a lot of assignment excessively. It kills us, not because of the coronavirus that causes us to die. May Allah protect us. The students said they tried to manage their time and refresh themselves whenever they were tired. They said this is what made learning from home flexible. However, they also faced disruption while studying, and they also commented about expensive internet costs and difficulties in obtaining learning materials during the emergency remote learning. Research question 2. I cannot see the button screen actually. Okay. Okay, I can see it now. This is question number 2. What do students like about the emergency remote learning implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic? 3 things that they like: flexibility and efficiency, self-care and self-development, and learning new technology. What do they dislike? A lack of structure, technical challenges, and financial barriers. Students likes. I codified, categorized from themes, and provided an explorative description and analysis of what students like about the remote learning implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. The figure on the screen portrays the data analysis and process of asserting findings. During the pandemic, students benefited from remote learning because of its flexibility and efficiency. Flexibility itself was the most common reason for students to be fond of remote learning. Efficiency has emerged from the students' view on how they save money, time, energy, and even paper during the remote learning period. These savings can be made because they do not need to leave home, do not need to buy gasoline or pay for transport to get to campus, or can even save paper because all tasks are collected digitally. Students were also happy to have time for themselves, to take care of themselves. They had more time to enjoy being with their families, resting, watching movies, and exercising. During the time of social restriction, they also spent time on self-development, including a new hobby or learning new things. A lot of female students said they learned to cook during the emergency remote learning period. Students said they learned to use new learning media while studying at home. Even before this pandemic, they rarely use information computer technologies. When studying, that led to them using these new applications such as Zoom, Google Classroom, digital maps, and others. Reading the student diaries and essays, I outlined a few fears among students that learning online from home during a pandemic outbreak affected the student's physical and psychological health. They complained that it was not good for their eyes and their overall well-being to stay in front of a laptop for hours. Psychologically, they were bored, stressed, exhausted, and lonely. They also talk about the problems they encountered in studying and the nature of the schooling received. In the majority of students, they criticize the overloading tasks that had become a burden on them. They required lecturers to improve their teaching methods. I discovered that the source of the problem was a lack of remote learning structure program during the coronavirus crisis. Students have been confronted with technological challenges that interfere with the remote learning process, such as device issues, internet connection issues, noisy and disturbing sounds in online discussion, and online discussion that are often disrupted by the connection. The student also said that the internet fees were costly and that they did not receive an allowance and had not additional income from the side job that used to do, which gave them additional earnings. One more thing that they complained about was that they had to pay the full tuition fee, but the learning was not adequate. This is what they don't like. From this is the likes. I forgot to next forward actually. Okay. This is what they do not dislike. So they dislike a lack of structure, technical challenges, and financial barriers. So we come to the third question that's become my writing project now, motivation despite all the limitation. What kept students motivated to learn despite all the limitation they encountered and endured during the COVID-19 pandemic? Before discussing the response to this question, I would like to address the limitation faced by students during emergency remote learning. This is the limitation as explained, and what they dislike is quite similar with what's become their limitation actually. And the highlighted is about the mental impact, physical impact, learning difficulties, quality of learning, and teaching methods. And this is actually an input for us as lecturer. They are actually giving us input to improve our teaching skills, especially in making our courses more structured. Maybe some of us still have conducting courses out of the schedule, and they are criticized it as something make learning very difficult at this time. And despite all the limitation of the emergency remote learning, university students remain motivated to study from home. What was their propensity to learn? So we see what makes them able to keep on learning, and this is maybe we can see what we can look and what we can go forward from this. And there are three main themes. First is personal, and then the second is social, and then the third is environmental. What it means by personal, it's maybe quite different from literature in the West, because this is including also religious commitment, how religious commitment actually trigger or even encourage them to learn further. Personal, okay. Students remain motivated to study remotely from home during the COVID-19 pandemic as they have been challenged by their learning targets. The learning impediments push their determination to study. Even they believe that emergency remote learning was ineffective, they were confident they could achieve their goal. A lot of their aims were to get a good grade, the aspiration to have a certain career path when they graduate, and to make their parents proud of them. They also saw that some people were in a worse situation and kept studying. If those people could do it, why they couldn't? They stay motivated by their curiosity. They said there were lessons to be learned in all situations, and they were eager to learn. Students' determination to carry out their assignment, to keep them active, and to study hard as they paid already for school fees. And this is actually mentioned by almost all the students. They are keep on saying that we have paid all the tuition fees, and actually we only get assignments from lecturers. We are expecting to get more than that. Students were motivated to learn as they continued to think positively, to be grateful, and to appreciate themselves. Students were happy if they learn, and they remain driven to learn, even though emergency remote learning has many limitations. They were motivated by their religious devotion. They believed that learning was a Muslim obligation, and they observed God rewards for learning. Some of the quotes from a student is as follows: "Learning is the duty of every Muslim. Because I'm a Muslim, I must therefore continue to study even there is a pandemic like this. I have a deep belief that learning is a worship. To repeat lessons is remembrance to God. Let's hope this pandemic come to an end soon so that I can study on campus again." So students' connection with their sibling, parents, extended family, and friends also had kept them learning in difficult time. Once they felt lost, they were searching for inspiration. Reading and watching other success stories or biographies and inspiring quotes kept them learning. Students remain motivated to study remotely during the outbreak of COVID-19 because they wanted to stay healthy and keep others healthy. If they did not like studying from home, they felt a shared responsibility to contain the virus by staying at home. And environmental motivation are students ought to have some provision so they can be driven to study. They were motivated to learn by playing music, listening to the verses of the Quran, minimizing the use of cell phones, relaxing when they're tired, and maintaining a pleasant mood. They also needed certain resources so they could concentrate on studying. For example, various learning platforms and comfortable place to study. So indeed, in the tough times of the COVID-19 crisis, students still have a positive attitude towards learning. Their outstanding features were on their own, the innate factors that they felt challenged, their enthusiasm and self-determination. The satisfaction of both the process of attaining and accomplishing their personal goal, as well as their religious devotion. They were also inspired by their social circle, their families, and their friends. They were influenced by biographies and inspiring quotes, determined to remain at home to contain the virus, and agreed that they should learn from home because they care for their well-being and the well-being of others. The environment also inspired them. The atmosphere and facilities at home helped them remain focused on learning. Their determination has made them resilient. A source to overcome and thrive on adversity during the pandemic. They used what they had to cope with the situation and be able to make progress in their study. This COVID-19 situation has been their first experience of school closure for more than a semester, studying remotely and adapting to challenges and many new experiences. They were not prepared, but many of them were able to make many adjustments and keep moving. They will manage this even better should they do happen again in the future if they are prepared for that, to be resilient in a life trial. This study limits the exploration of university student insight and observation, using only qualitative data and using a less representative sample. I suggested further studies involving more dispersed samples and using mixed methods. This research concentrates on studying motivation, which could be expanded and to investigate adolescents and children vulnerability and resilience, and establish a resilience education model. So this is our homework for the next project, is to look at how we actually can prepare our students, especially for Indonesia case, one of the most disaster prone areas. Disaster, including pandemic, could happen anytime, and we better prepare our students and also our lecturer, as criticized by the students that our lecturers are not well prepared for the next future challenges. That's all for today. Thank you very much. And Pak Kustiawan, now you can continue with the next program.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rahim, for such a great presentation based on your research project. And of course, congratulations on the publication of those articles. Wow, that's awesome. And indeed, I think we have learned from Dr. Rahim's research project about how our students experience the pandemic situation, and also about how they manage themselves to remain motivated in learning. And very interesting was about that personal reason, somehow that Dr. Rahim suggested could be related to religious reason, probably so specific to our context. Wow, that's very interesting. All right, and before we go any further, first, I would like to thank Vice Rector for joining this international webinar, Professor Dr. Faisal Bhakti. Thank you so much. And we're so sorry we were not aware that you've been here with us for quite some time. Again, mohon maaf, Bapak. And thank you so much.
Our seminar, Bapak.
Yes, and thank you so much for supporting this international webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, to unpack and explore ideas or issues related to those presentations made by our speakers. It is now time for us to have a question and session. So if you have questions, comments, or perspectives, you may write your questions in the chat room, and then the organizers are going to collect your questions and then will be presented here. So we will be able to read all the questions. While waiting for the participants' question, let me begin with asking this simple and a little bit practical question to our distinguished speakers. And let me begin with research findings from Dr. Maila Rahim. This is again something about digital divide, like that so many students feel that, well, it's really hard for us to do this remote learning because of they have no access to the internet. And then they have some financial problems to buy the credits or the quota we call here in Indonesia. Now, my question to both of you, Professor Tamatea and Dr. Mason, can you share with us the recent condition in Australia? How much has this pandemic affected the education sector there? So do you or do Australian people experience this digital divide or not at all? Or could you please share with us? And how have you responded to those challenges in practical terms? So, because this is indeed a real challenge here in our country. Let's begin with Professor Tamatea.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. Yes, the answer is yes. We do have variations on the digital divide in Australia, and those divisions emerge for a range of reasons. They can emerge because of where somebody lives based on location, and that's certainly an experience of some students in the Northern Territory, which, as you know, is a big area with very few people living in it. It can occur along the basis of income and wage. It can occur on the basis of gender and things like that. So, and it can also occur for students who have special needs and things like that also need to be catered for in teaching in an online environment. So for me, I think the short answer is yes, and it's one of the areas that Charles Darwin University seeks to respond to as best it can, and put in workarounds for that where possible. Quickly, however, you know, one of the areas that I do research in Bali is around disadvantage and poverty, and I think that it's important to appreciate that poverty is a relative concept, and so it's always difficult to compare two different contexts.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Tamatea. And about you, Dr. Mason, do you have something to say about this?
Yes, I have a few comments.
Sure.
There is clearly some digital divide, certainly in the Northern Territory and in remote areas in Australia. We have some poor access to internet and that kind of thing. It's not as pronounced perhaps as in other parts of the world. In terms of the response to COVID and the trend to homeschooling and learning online, all these things, initially I observed a great willingness right across Australia to be falling into line and to doing this. There was always some sort of pushback by some people who didn't want to do that, and it was a debate for some time actually whether or not the schools should be open or they should be closed. And for a period, many of our schools were closed, and there was a number of very good stories about how quickly teachers and students were were learning how to experience this new mode. And then as time has proceeded, there's been people have been getting tired and been really anxious about getting back to normal and wanting to get back to school and all these things. And there is also the fatigue to connect with Bu Maila's research about motivation. I think it's really a challenge to maintain the motivation and the interest in engaging in this kind of way. There's many stories now of students and teachers becoming quite fatigued with this medium because the novelty has worn off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Meshen. Now, Ibu Maila, very interesting research findings, of course. I know you're also specialized in an early childhood education. By the way, organizers, Ibu Vivi, when you're ready with the questions, you can just show the questions to us here on the screen. Back to you, Bu Maila. So you're so specialized in early childhood education, right?
Yes.
I know your research is about tertiary education, but in your observations, what's going on to students at this level? So I just couldn't imagine how, so here I'm bringing the issue of lost learning experience. So can you say something about that related to childhood education?
Thank you, Pak Kustiawan. And actually, it's also part of my research because we have another research project. Me and my 3 students who just graduated from the program this semester, and they continue working with me. We are looking at how actually remote learning going on in the level of early childhood education. And we have also very rich data collected from the experience of the teachers and also parents. And they are explaining about some of the parents are actually commenting about that they want to postpone their students to study in early childhood education, and they keep the children just to be at home because this is also challenging. One of the things in early childhood education, children has no access for internet and for cell phone. And what we look at the remote learning in Indonesia at this time, they are always equate the remote learning with online learning. This is one thing that we should consider, that when I show the map of Indonesian archipelago and how the university distributed, and if you look at the map of early childhood and how it's more dispersed, and this is also a challenge actually, that we should rely on online learning for the level of elementary school and also the early childhood, because they are not prepared. They don't have the access. Family also not having the access, and internet is a problem. And if we look at the data, it's actually the use of internet and the 4G connection is only in urban cities. This is also a question. That's why UNESCO and Ministry of Education, actually, they are now doing the teaching from television, but it's also a problem, but not because many areas in Indonesia, they don't have access for electricity. So we should think about it. This is not only about online learning. This is emergency, and this is remote learning that we should consider, that there are various of learners and educators in our country.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing those great ideas, Mr. and Ms. speakers. And now I think we're ready with the questions. So this question number 1 actually addressed to each of you, Mr. and Ms. speakers. So I can read for you, and you can also read yourself, actually. So question number 1. So let's begin with Professor Tamatea. Yes. Yeah. So what is the most effective application for teaching and learning activities? And what kinds of learning activities are most effective during the COVID-19 pandemic? And this question is from, small.
Pakandita, I think,
Yes,
Kustiawan.
Sure.
Yeah. I can say.
Sure. Go ahead.
Answer this. So actually, my view is there are many choices for effective applications, and yes, we might have our favourite ones and useful activities. One of my favourites is using a program called Slido because I like to introduce student questioning. I think it's very important to empower our students and their thinking so that they learn how to think in questions, not just think in answers, because often as teachers we are always the ones asking the questions of our students, and so our students just are often learning at school how to think in answers all the time. So I like to have activities that change that around and teach the students how to ask questions. Those sorts of activities I find very effective. But I think the other thing about this is because there are so many applications to use and to choose from, I think it's also important as an educator to have an open mindset when it comes to technology and choosing apps, choosing applications, and maybe sometimes we can make these choices together with our students and with our colleagues.
All right, thank you so much for your response, Dr. Nation. Now moving on to Professor Tamatea, could you please answer your question?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, look, really good question. So for me, in attempting to respond to this question, you know, I see this the question around space as being fundamental to aspects of building in animation in game design, and teaching students around what we call conditionals and if statements. And in the Minecraft game, you'd be aware, or in Minecraft coding, you know, you would set a goal. You would set a goal. The goal would be get to a particular place on the map, or navigate your character to a particular place. And it's about setting the conditions into the program that are going to allow your character to get to that space. So through a series of if statements, and also if you were looking at Scratch, you'd be looking at very similar sorts of things along the movement along XY axes. Things like that. So it is quite good, and I think what you're alluding to there also is the cross-disciplinarity between different teaching areas. So where coding, for example, can draw upon elements of the other elements from STEM areas and maths and science, and vice versa.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Tamatea. And moving on, Ibu Malia, please go ahead. Yes.
Okay, terima kasih Pak Kestiwan. About copyright, it's also something that we really need to taking care of, and also give example to our students that there is copyright in every paper that we distribute. And I always put respect on it. And but we should look at now we have a lot of open access journal that we can access. But from reading the students' diaries and reflective essays, they are talking about actually they don't have enough materials. This is something that it's like an alarm for us as educators. In this open access society, when learning is online, the students say they don't have access to material. Then if we look at why we explore this reason that they are talking about, one of the things is Indonesian language materials, academic materials, because they said that the lecturers forbid us to quote from the blogspot, from Wikipedia, but from where we should look at. And this is also something that we should prepare our students, because we actually have access to a lot of journals, and we can share with them that the Perpustakaan Nasional is actually open access, and then we can search from DOAJ, directory of open access. And also this is challenging also about language barriers. When they said that there is no reference, we cannot go to the library. And this is like something that we are not expecting to happen, because if we if we are computer literate and English literate, I don't think this is going to be a problem. And also if we know how. So to know how, this is part of our job as a lecturer, to let them know you can find the materials here and there. And this is free because this is open access. And about sharing the book, because they said we cannot read the book. And we should also encourage them that learning is not only reading from books, because there are many sources of learning. It's not only about reading books in the library. So this is challenging for us actually to motivate students, to open their mind about academic world in different perspectives. That's all, Mark.
Thank you so much, Ibu Maila. I think that's very insightful. All right, so I think we're going to take more questions from the participants, and that's all for the first session. And now we're moving on to the second session. And Ibu Vivi, could you show the next set of questions, please? All right, so these are the second questions to all of you, Mr. and Ms. speakers. We may begin with Dr. Mejan if you're ready. Or maybe Professor Tamatea. Sure.
Okay, so yes, as we know, learning online is the best answer. During this period, we have that situation. And yes, there's lots of disparity around the world in terms of access. It is a big problem, having access to adequate equipment, and a lot of people are marginalized in this process. And I mentioned before that I'm well aware that there are hundreds of millions of children around the world that just do not have any access to education at all. But I'm encouraged. Actually, I have a PhD student from Pakistan, Faisal bin Bada, and he's doing some really interesting work on finding some innovative solutions that bring together old approaches to teaching, using one-room schoolhouses, multi-grade one-room schoolhouses, and then using a mix of technologies, some of which is online and some of which is offline. And it's interesting to explore that there are, in fact, a range of innovative technologies around that can duplicate the kind of online experience, although we might be offline, just through other kinds of technology that we can bring into the picture. But I think it's a longer conversation, and I'm very happy to pursue that question via email if you wish.
Oh, wow, thank you so much for that. Thank you again, Dr. Mejan. And now, Professor Tamatea.
Yeah, thanks for going first, John, because it's taken me 5 minutes to think of an answer for this question.
Oh,
so
really? Sorry about that. Yeah, you may take your time actually before answering this question.
The theory to life, the universe, and everything. So
sure.
Here we go.
Okay.
Look, I think one of the best things we can do is that as teachers in a university, in training our teachers, is to actually be a role model for what we want them to do in the classroom. So it starts there. In our resource material, in our learning material that we're giving them, I would hope that I can actually demonstrate and role model the kinds of things that they need to think about when they go out into teaching, or indeed when they teach right now in this COVID-19 environment. So one of the things I do is have a very well-structured, clear and articulated full curriculum map of the entire learning experience for the particular unit or semester. And you know, that takes us through firstly identifying the objectives. What do you want to learn That's always the first question. What do you want to learn? And then, of course, going through the learning strategies, learning experiences, informal assessment to formal assessment at the other end, and making sure that the assessment at the end is actually measuring the objectives that you identified at the beginning. And a word for that which people use is constructive alignment. So you need to have that alignment going through the curriculum map from the beginning to the end. For me, whether it happens in an online environment or not, I think what I'm talking about there is principles of good teaching and learning, full stop. And then, of course, the question is, now I've identified my objectives, what are the best learning strategies to help the students realise those objectives? And of course, you look around and see what's available for you and so on. It's a very, very big question, but hopefully I've been able to clarify my position for you today.
Thank you so much, Professor Tamatea, for that insightful answer to the question. And now, Ibu Maila.
Okay, terima kasih, Pak Kestiwan. Actually, in the paper that I wrote, I suggested a few things. The first one is distributing the teaching contents into smaller units to help students focus. The lecturer should divide the teaching content into several small modules lasting approximately only 25 minutes, because this is online learning or remote learning, and concentration is also a fact that we should consider into. And then emphasizing the use of voice in online teaching. Body language and facial expression are restricted or very limited in online instruction, and only the voice is entirely functional. Therefore, in online teaching, the faculty should properly slow down its speech to allow students to capture critical knowledge points. They are criticized about they cannot capture what the lecturers are talking about. And working with the teaching assistant and get online help from them. This is what not becoming our kebiasaan, or we are familiar with, because we don't have concept of, we have concept of team teaching. So the concept we should, more emphasize teaching in a team. So there is someone that will help us if we are not digitally capable. So we can have someone who can develop the program for us, and then to help us to present the papers or things like that. Because the students also complaining that they call it that the lecturers have cultural shock. They don't know how. So some of the lecturers are being criticized. They are not, do not know how to use the technology. And then the next is strengthening the students' ability to learn outside the classroom. We should move their paradigms of learning from books and learning from listening to the speech of the lecturers into learning is active. They are capable to do to study even though they are alone, they are remote, and they can do it at home. So this is also we should look at, and also we should take consideration about the excessive assignments they are criticized. So this is maybe we should look forward in our next semester that we should combine and then structure our teaching more deliberately, so students not only thinking that they are actually doing assignments, but they are actually learning. That's all, Pak Kustiawan.
Thank you so much for your response, Ibu Maila. And also thank you so much, the participants, for all the questions. We really appreciate your contribution to this fruitful conversation about our theme. And moving on to the next session of our Q&A, question number 3. What if we begin with Dr. Maila? Dr. Maila, are you ready to begin with?
Okay, I just read actually.
Okay, so so you have 1 minute to read the questions. Just please have 1 or 2 minutes to read the question first. I hope you're okay with font size then.
Yes.
You ready? Okay,
yes.
Go first, Dr. Maila.
Yes, that's actually the limitation of my study, because my study is the participants are not it's not widespread. It's only from Jakarta area. students who are studying in a university in Jakarta, but some of them are now returning back to their hometown, like to some provinces. So this is also what we, this is for the next project for all of you, and maybe I can do it also. We can collaborate. That we look not only from the very specific case, but maybe we can expand the sample, and also about the characteristic of the region and students, and also that from reading what they are talking about the quote, the data plan for the internet, this is also something that we should consider. Well, I have a discussion with ITS, Institut Teknologi Surabaya, a professor. We discuss about how much money students need for a semester. So he calculated actually, if in one semester a student taking 20 credits mean 66 hours per month. So we should consider that students need at least 250,000 per month to buy data plan, so they can access the learning. And also that we should look at also that learning shouldn't be only synchronous, but also asynchronous. So because using Zoom and Google Meet considered as expensive, so we should develop learning materials that integrate all the the media that are available. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that great response, Ibu Maila. And now, Professor Tamatea, so it's your time to answer the question.
Okay, so this is a really good question. I noticed there that there's a suggestion around copy and pasting from Google and things like that. So I'll just briefly talk about that in terms of plagiarism. Some of the learning management systems that universities use, such as Blackboard, will actually help us get around that a little bit because they have plagiarism detection software. But beyond that, I think one of the responses that we can put in place is to actually have a variety of assessment tasks and objectives that allow students to actually demonstrate a range of skills. So you've got the formal written paper. Of course, that will be different in different discipline areas. You've got problem-based learning, which is an assessment of that, and you know, a number of my assessment pieces, or one of them at least this year, is simply pass-fail based on whether they can actually produce a digital artifact or not. And they either can or they can't do that. Another one is to the application of the knowledge there. So those sorts of things allow us to mitigate the impacts of students' accessibility to information that's out there online, so that the copy and paste problem becomes a little bit less of a concern. But it really depends on the discipline. For me, in terms of teaching coding, I absolutely encourage students to make mistakes, and I feel that they learn a lot through making mistakes. So I incorporate that into my assessment regimes as well. But it's about mixing up the assessment tasks, so you have a variety. I think that's what works for me.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Tamatea. And now it's your time, Dr. Mason, to answer your question.
Okay, so yes, another good question. I think in terms of activities that can happen in this kind of situation where research activities, actually there's so many things we can do with e-research. Some of it can be done real time and some of it is asynchronous, but there's so many tools that we can use. And in fact, I would think that students completing a thesis involving experiments and classroom activities could actually they could perhaps be invited as part of their project to conduct something like a Zoom session and to run some polls within the Zoom session, collect some data about student choices and student preferences and their views. That could be done in real time. I also think that there's many opportunities for just survey questionnaires online in which we can collect both quantitative data as well as qualitative data about what is happening. So I see a lot of opportunity in moving the thesis activity online. So I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Nation. And also thank you so much all the participants who have asked the questions. And we will only have 3 sessions of Q&A. And ladies and gentlemen, it's always enlightening indeed to have a discussion like this with such resourceful people like our distinguished speakers for today. Unfortunately, due to time limitation, we have to end our webinar at this point. And I don't think I need to draw conclusions of this webinar. So you're free to draw your own conclusions, of course. But let me close this webinar by quoting 2 verses of our holy book, Al-Quran. A'udhu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Fa inna ma'al usri yusran. Inna ma'al usri yusra. The essence of these 2 verses is restated by Albert Einstein. In the middle of every difficulty lies opportunity. And we do hope that this COVID-19 pandemic will be soon over. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organizers, I express my deepest gratitude to our distinguished speakers, Professor Tamatea. Thank you so much for your great insight into the theme for this international webinar. And also Dr. Mason, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. Terima kasih banyak. And Ibu Maila, thank you so much for sharing some great research findings related to the most recent topic, COVID-19. We believe that we have learned so much from your presentations. And the same gratitude also goes to all the participants. Thank you so much for joining us, for following our international webinar, and especially for those who contributed to our insightful conversation by asking questions. I'm Gustiwan Sharif. See you next time. Sampai jumpa di lain kesempatan. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Mr. Host.
for you all.
Terima kasih banyak semuanya.
Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih Pak John
Terima
Mason.
kasih.
I think
Terima
we have closing statements, right?
Yeah, we have
shall
closing
be
statement before we
displaying
close
that.
our webinar.
Okay.
Well, I think this is all the time we have for our webinar today. Please look for our follow-up emails that will alert you to the on-demand status of today's event so that you can review any material you missed or simply go on over again. Also, please take a moment to fill out our questions exit survey. To all our invited speaker today, all participants as well as the team of these events, thank you so much for joining us this morning and taking time to view our presentation today. My name is Zahil Anasi, and have a great day. And we will end this webinar by closing statement from our committee. Please, Ibu Tita.
Probably, excuse me. Just a second. Maybe I got a technical problem again. Oh, wow, this is the second time.
Don't forget to see our this event on your YouTube channel. by password
saya tidak lupa.
Webinar 2020. Don't forget to give your subscribe and comment. Thank you all. See you.
Terima kasih Pak Sahari.
Pak John.
Pak John.
Thank you.
Pak
Terima kasih
Loren,
banyak.
Pak Ganteng.
Pak Ganteng.
Bu Maila,
Bu Maila.
Ibu Maila.
All the participants. See you again.
Ganteng, Pak Tamatia, Pak Ganteng. Okay, thank you so much.
Pak Ganteng.
Pak Kusniawan. Bu Tita.
Ibu
Your
Tita.
bahasa Indonesia is very good, Pak Tamatea.
Thank you.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Lauren yang ganteng. Terima kasih banyak juga Bu Maila.
Terima kasih.
It is great.
Okay.
Sampai jumpa.
Sampai jumpa.
Terima kasih.
Oke, participants, terima kasih juga semuanya.
Semua partisipan, terima kasih semuanya telah bergabung.
Pintar-pintar bahasa Indonesianya ini, Pak John Mason juga.
Juga.
Thank you to all speaker.
Betul itu.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Can we leave now, Pak Kusniawan?
Hi. Yeah, sure. Feel free to leave this room, guys.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Wow, Bu Nida.
Ibu Nida. Ibu Dekan, thank you so much. Ibu Dekan, thank you so much.
Ibu Dekan, terima kasih banyak.
Baik videonya.
Sekali, panitia bekerja dengan bagus sekali. Terima kasih. Keren.
Agree, Bu Dekan. Keren banget.
Terima kasih Bu panitia, jangan keluar dulu ya.
Panitia jangan keluar dulu ya. Kita makan bareng siang, makan siang bareng ya.
Makan virtual.
Makan bareng virtual ya.
Makan bareng virtual.
Minum kopi dulu. Minum kopi dulu.
Thank you very much. See you.
Ya, terima kasih panitia.